welcome to Cover Story. Today we have with us a very interesting guest. We have with us Amish Tripathi. He's the director of Nehru Center. But more interestingly, what I'm going to be talking to him is, of course, his role as an author. He's the author of the Shiva trilogy and also the Ramchandra series. Today he's come out with his latest book. I have it with me. It's The War of Lanka. This is the fourth book in the Ramchandra series. And congratulations, Amish, what a brilliant, wonderful book.
Thank
I think
you,
I will have to ask you for adjectives to help me describe this book. It's been I read it at one go. It's unputdownable, really. But you know, the way, the ease of your writing, the way you make a mythology accessible to all of us, which our education system does not. But you know, the way you bring your characters alive, the banter between the characters, they become human. They're not just, you know, gods and all that. That's what I really want to, you know, praise and applaud you. You're really a modern day Valmiki.
No. Even hearing that is a sin. But thank you.
No, it's wonderful. A bit about the book, you know, this is the last of the series of the Ramchandra.
There is a fifth book, but that will come many years later.
Why? ये भी बहुत देर कर दी.
No, that's a bit like an epilogue. See, because this is where the traditional Ramayana ends. So this is, Ravan Vadh ho gaya hai, Ravan has been killed. Lord Ram and Goddess Sita have come back to Ayodhya. First Diwali has been celebrated. So for most people, this will give you a sense of conclusion. The fifth book is actually a connection between Ramchandra series and Shiva trilogy. It's called The Rise of Meluha. So Ramchandra series is in a way a 1500-year prequel to the events of the Shiva trilogy. The fifth book is actually what will connect these two. So I'll come with that a few years later.
Which is what I like. There's always a connection between your books. You know, you make sure that we read all of them. Otherwise, we are left wondering.
Correct. It's called the cliffhanger ending.
Cliffhanger ending. That is true. What made you so interested in mythology? And also, I want a little bit, you know, you bring the interaction between you make the brothers come alive. You know, I know a lot of it is, of course, created by you with the fictional characters, but at least you flesh out, like, you know, Shatrughan is very good an engineer, Bharat takes the art of war. So that kind of a thing, if you can tell us a bit up to our readers, the characteristics of each character as you have seen them.
You know, my background is such, Priya, that my grandfather was a Pandit in Kashi, Vishwanathji. And both my parents are deeply religious. And my grandmother on my mother's side was also a teacher in Gwalior. And so our family had this atmosphere. We are deeply embedded in our traditions, in our scriptures. And actually, in the Indian way, the more traditional you are, actually the more liberal you will be. Because our traditions, our ancient scriptures are actually very liberal.
Yeah.
And the thing is actually that if you discover many of the ancient texts, there have been so many interpretations of our stories, and especially many of the Sanskrit plays, not just Kalidasa. People stop at Kalidasa, but writers like Bhasa or so many others, even the non-Sanskrit. Because you learn so much more. Like Bhasa had written this Pancharatra, which was an interpretation of the Mahabharata. And the conversations between the characters were so interesting. And since we grew up with it, we always thought that they would have interacted with each other, because our gods essentially, many of them, gods and goddesses, had human qualities as well.
Yeah.
Right? And which makes them much more relatable. So even think about it, how we interact with our gods at temples. We don't just go and pray. Some of us like Shaivites. I'm a Shaivite.
Which is clear.
So we look at Lord Shiva like, आप तो हमारे बाबा हैं, आपको ये करना ही पड़ेगा. We almost demand. I'm in trouble. You have to help.
अपनों का हक.
हाँ. So we have that, a very deep bond with our gods and goddesses. And then if you put those conversations across, you kind of feel that in a way.
Because there is also, the banter between brothers. They are gods, but they are
very close to each other.
Bharat, they'll pull his leg. Bharat will tell Lakshman to pipe down.
And Priya, the thing is that there are, there are various versions of the Ramayana. But one thing that's constant across all the Ramayans, that all four brothers are very close to each other. No matter what, the mothers may have had differences, but the brothers are very close to each other. So that needs to be showcased in a way. How they talk to each other, the things they do for each other. Without thinking, they're there for each other, so, and then in a way, then you understand the decisions that they take as well. Like among the things that had always struck me when I heard the Ramayana for the first time, from my grandfather, I would have been, I don't know, maybe 5, 6. You have to understand it's the question of a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. I asked, bhai, the brothers are so close, how come only Lord Ram and Lord Lakshman are fighting the battle? Where are Lord Bharat and Lord Shatrughan, they should come. You know, and because I thought we are four, siblings, 3 brothers, 1 sister. We are very close. You know, we'll fight for each other all the time. So, which is why in my interpretation, the way it came to me is that Lord Bharat and Lord Shatrughan would also come. They would also fight. You know, kandhe se kandha with their dada, with their elder brother.
And you also, your interpretation of Sita, that's also come into, Sita Ma has also come into a lot of, speculation that you've made her into a warrior. You know, she comes also, there are battle scars, there are,
I wish I could take credit for that interpretation. Unfortunately, I can't. There are ancient versions which actually speak of this. So there's a version of the Ramayana called the Adbhut Ramayana, which is also credited to Valmiki ji. Valmiki ji is credited with 3 Ramayans, Valmiki Ramayana, Adbhut Ramayana and Ananda Ramayana. In the Adbhut Ramayana, there are 2 Ravans. And the elder Ravan is the more powerful one, who's killed by Sita Ma, not by Lord Ram. He's killed by Sita Ma. There's a lovely, I've quoted that line in Sita Warrior of Mithila at the beginning. You know the wonderful Mahabharat line, Yada Yada Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata, where Lord Krishna says. There's an interpretation of that line in the Adbhut Ramayana, Yada Yada Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Suvrata Abhyuthanam Adharmasya Tada Prakruti Sambhava. That remember, O keeper of righteous vows, whenever adharma rises or dharma is in decline, the sacred feminine will incarnate. She will defend dharma, she will protect us.
And Sita is the embodiment.
And Sita is the goddess.
आपने कहीं बोला था इंटरव्यू में कि इंटरप्रिटेशन और रामायण में लक्ष्मण रेखा थी ही नहीं किसी
ओरिजिनल वाल्मीकि रामायण में इसका वर्णन नहीं है, आप सही कह रही हैं। और जिस प्रकार में हमने वो 1980s टेलीविजन सीरियल में देखा है कि लक्ष्मण जी वो बाण निकाल के ऐसे खींच रहे हैं, वैसे तो रामचरितमानस में भी नहीं है। रामचरितमानस में अगर मुझे याद है तो लंका कांड में एक जिक्र किया गया इसका। मंदोदरी स्पीक्स टू रावण एंड शी मेंशंस दिस, बट देयर आर अदर वर्जन्स ऑफ द रामायण आल्सो। आई थिंक इन कृतिभाषी रामायण इट हैज बीन मेंशन्ड, व्हिच इज आई थिंक अराउंड 1000 years old, but in the original Valmiki Ramayana actually it's not there. It's very interesting. Lakshman Rekha is not there.
एंड आपने जैसे रावण को दिखाया है, इन योर अर्लियर बुक तो थोड़े डार्क कैरेक्टर थे, लेकिन अब जैसे कि आपने उनको इंटरप्रेट किया है, वन सीता herself finds some kind of bond with him.
More than a bond, it is more like talking to him and seeing, that there is a different thing, and this is there in many of the versions of the Ramayana, that Ravan's, of course, his bad points are shown, anger management issues, ego out of control, but his good points are also shown, in many of the versions of the Ramayana. So, different from our modern day, how we see Ravan. In our ancestors saw Ravan in a nuanced way. Talented tha, he was, brilliant, he knew the Vedas, he had composed hymns, he was a musician, he was a good administrator, but yes, no control over his desires. मन में आ गया बस करना है, no control over his anger, no control over his ego. Those are those bad points, and we kind of, I try to present that in a nuanced way.
Also, throughout the book there is a theme running कि कौन है, who is the asli avatar of Vishnu? Is it Ram or is it Sita? So
that the answer is there in the Shiva trilogy. In any case, that it's Lord Ram. Achha. But the thing is the discussion between the two of them, and this is something that's there in the Adbhut Ramayana as well. That what makes a Vishnu, what makes a good Vishnu. And one of the things, at least that struck me from many versions of the Ramayana that we have read, not just mine. Lord Ram, Goddess Sita and Ravan, all three suffered. One of the things in our ways, great people, it is their fate to suffer. Okay? And often our life is not so much about what happens to us. It's about how we react to what happens to us. And Ravan reacts to his suffering in a very negative way. Anger, rage, the world hurt me, I'll burn the entire world. Whereas Lord Ram reacts, in a more noble way. Goddess Sita reacts in a more pragmatic way, that I have suffered, but I'm not going to, inflict that suffering on others.
That's right? The gender card also.
No, Goddess Sita as well, the way she behaves, right? Yeah. And even Lord Ram, the way he behaves. So there is something to be learnt on how they behave when they are hit by suffering. And that's something that we can learn from, because Ravan, by behaving the way he did, made his own life worse, basically.
Correct. You also say that, that the whole idea that God is just one and God are not humans, you are against that. You are saying that there is a human side in gods also.
part
Which
of our key thing that the Jivatma and Paramatma are one and the same, which Adi Shankaracharya ji also spoke of, is that there's a divine spirit within us as well. When we say Namaste, it essentially translates as I'm bowing to the divine within you. So, one way of looking at it is that the difference between our gods and us is that they have discovered the divine within. We are yet to discover the divine within. How do we know we haven't discovered it? Because we are still here. Moment we discover it, we'll get moksha and we'll become one with the divine. So it's kind of, so in our way, divinity is can also be seen as a process.
Right.
We have to raise ourselves to the divine. So then we see our gods and goddesses as archetypes to learn from. You know, that what can we learn from them and apply in our lives so that we can also become more divine.
And it makes them more, we can empathize more with them,
Exactly,
knowing they are like us, but they have reached.
Yeah, they come closer to us so that we can learn from them. Because the Nirgun Nirakar, the formless God, as has been said in our scriptures, is very difficult to understand, let alone learn from.
You also, there are some passages, I don't want to do a spoiler alert here, but you also, there is a thought, the way one of your characters says that Ram says, I think Ramji, that there is no end, it is only the means. This is when they were questioning him, why are you giving medicine to the Lankans? He says, end is endless.
Lord Ram was very clear that if you win through wrong means, that is, you might as well not win. So he was very clear, his battle was with Ravan and his army. The ordinary Lankan citizens cannot be allowed to suffer. They were suffering a disease at that point in time. Lord Ram had,
the plague that he has.
and Lord Ram had medicines for his army, and he decided that they will send medicines to the Lankan citizens in Sigiriya as well, so that the ordinary citizens don't suffer. And in his mind, his entire thing is that if I don't fight the right way, then what is the point of winning? But there was a pragmatic thing in it as well, because he said, once I defeat Ravan's army, I need to take control of the city so that it doesn't evolve into chaos. And obviously, he was right that if the citizens saw him as a good, as a good person, then they would follow him, right? And so there's a pragmatic reason to it as well. But the entire thing that in a dharmic way, you must be as conscious of the means as the end as well.
Yeah, because there is no end; it is endless. So
And he says, I mean, the point is that how do you know that that the wrong means you've taken take you to another end, which you didn't want, right?
Correct.
So path itself, there's that path dependency, right? आपको मंजिल वहाँ जानी है, आपने सोचा कोई भी पाथ पकड़ लेंगे, लेकिन एक पाथ आपको गलत मंजिल पर ही ले जाए.
There is another idea that is explored, one of the gurus wants, is the Maika system, which is that all the children should be handed over to the state and then assigned castes according to their capabilities. Can you tell us a bit about this thought?
So actually, this, in the Ramchandra series, it's being discussed as a theory. In the Shiva trilogy, you see it as practice, because Shiva trilogy is set 1500 years later. The entire concept is that, that an individual's position should be defined by his or her karma. His or her attributes, not by his or her birth. So Prahlad was, we know, I mean, he was a good man, but we know who he was born to, right? And it can go the other way as well. So what system can be set so that you give every child a fair chance, right? Because you can say, yes, there should be merit. But how is there merit when, someone's parents are very wealthy and they give him or her the best opportunities? Someone's parents are not, my parents weren't very wealthy, but they gave the 4 of us siblings education way beyond their income and social class. They made those sacrifices. We benefited from it. Correct? So we were lucky, that our parents sacrificed so much of us 4 siblings. How do you make this entire system fair? The Maika system is an exploration on how it could be made fair. That say everyone is educated by the state, and so everyone gets an equal treatment. So it's not defined by your birth, your status. It will be defined by your qualities and your capabilities, and then you will get assigned to adoptive parents.
And there is also an argument which I found very interesting, is the argument of the elite versus the rise of the counter elite. If you could, it comes from this model.
Yeah. So I've explained this in a story. It's actually a theory by Peter Turchin. I mainly read non-fiction.
Okay.
So Peter Turchin's theories are.
हमारे लिए fiction लिख दिया.
हाँ, लिखता non-fiction, पढ़ता non-fiction हूँ, लेकिन लिखता ज़्यादा fiction. So The entire thing, Peter Turchin's theories are that most, and you tie it into, Nassim Nicholas Taleb's theory that it's a stubborn minority which forces history forward rather than, and his theory is that a majority normally just goes along. Doesn't mean, the minority can be defined in various ways, right? So, which ties into Peter Turchin's theory that stubborn minority is essentially the elite. And the only way the elite can be taken on is with a counter elite. And in some ways, competition between the elite and counter elite is good because both of them will hopefully try to gain the affection of the masses and then do something for them. Because if it's a stable situation, the elite doesn't have to do that much for the masses. But the problem is, what if this counter revolution leads to a lot of violence and chaos?
Right.
Which then makes things bad for everyone. So there are various theories like this. I've just started exploring it in this book, and it'll get explored much further in the 5th book. But it's essentially based on Peter Turchin's theories.
But this is what I find very interesting is that, we have here with us someone who is also well read, articulates it well, and you bring in a lot of ideas and theories that are explored in the book. I'm going to come to another one, but after a quick break. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Cover Story. We are here in conversation with Amish Tripathi. In fact, I have with me his latest book, The War of Lanka. As you know, he's done a series on the Ramchandra series and also on the Shiva trilogy. He's a Shiv Bhakt. But one more concept, maybe it's not in the book, but I've heard it from your conversations, is which you say you heard it first from, I think, Sanjeev Sanyal, the Ashokan state versus the
Chanakyan state.
Yeah.
It's an interesting theory which I heard from Sanjeev, and of course I've read the Chanakya Niti and Arthashastra, and of course I've read of Ashoka. I think it's something worth exploring because in summary, the Chanakyan state is essentially a minimal state which does a few things, does it exceptionally well, and leaves the rest to society to figure out. Right? The Ashokan state is a maximalist state. Tries to interfere in many things, like the Ashokan state was, at least from what I'm aware, the first Indian state which tried to encourage vegetarianism, for example. But before that, the states didn't do that. It's your call. You do what you want. The Ashokan state tries to do many things, as a result of which it's not able to do everything well because the state can only have so much capacity, right? At least I think that for the Indian way, the Chanakyan state is perhaps better. I'm telling you why, because I have seen in the West where many of the states have become what you would call an Ashokan state, a Western interpretation of that, where the state has got involved in too many things. It has come about through citizens asking for rights. Okay, and I know it's a little counterintuitive, but if you ask for rights from the state, then obviously the state has to become more powerful to deliver those rights.
Correct.
And if the state becomes more powerful, you think it'll only care about delivering your rights, it'll do many other things as well, right? And the Chanakyan state approach is never have the state too powerful for society. The state should be powerful enough to defend against foreign aggressors. But society should always be equally powerful to the state. And so counterintuitively, in asking for more and more and more rights, citizens actually weaken themselves because they make the state too powerful. It happens over many decades. So maybe the generation that asks for rights will not suffer. Maybe the next generation will suffer. Now, if you think about it right now, in the West, if a school teacher has decided that a 10 or 12-year-old child wants to have a gender reassignment surgery, right? The parents cannot say no. If the parents say no, the state can interfere, right? Okay. Where all will the state is interfering within the family, right? Where all will these powers go, right? And to me, that sounds scary, right? Also, then what ends up happening is if the Ashokan state becomes too big, the core things that they need to do, they're not able to do because the state is distracted. What is the core things? Build infrastructure, defend the country from foreign aggressors, ensure law and order, ensure justice moves quickly. What we have in India today, what we have built over the last 75 years is more of an Ashokan state. My suggestion is actually a Chanakyan state is perhaps better. India is also more of a bottom-up society rather than a top-down society. We are by nature a rebellious people. So it'll also work better for us.
No, in fact, you also talk about the UCC versus the Bill of Rights, right? You say that, that because why should the state again interfere in religion and in other things?
So if the society, anyone in society comes to the state should only have one set of laws. All right. But if two people are managing it between themselves and none of them have a problem, the state shouldn't interfere. Okay. But the state can't have different laws for different groups. Because then what you're setting up is that Ottoman Turkic millet system. We all know the chaos that led to, right? That is only, by maintain peace for some times. That's not what leads to a better state or a better society, right? So there should be a common, everyone should be subject to the same laws, everyone. But those laws should be as few as possible. There's no need to have unnecessarily random laws for everything under the sun. And the state should only get involved when someone goes to them with a dispute.
But
ideally, that's what a Chanakyan state is.
Ideally, yes. We all leave it at that. But a little bit about, I wanted to talk to you about you also. You made the gods become human for us, and also the human side of Amish Tripathi. You talk a lot about your son. Tell us a bit about him. Does he read your books?
Oh, I love him. My son is my life. He's 13. His name is Neil. He's the love of my life. I've dedicated this book to my father, late V.K. Tripathi, and my son Neil. He reads a lot. He reads even more than I do. I read 5-6 books per month. He reads around 8-9 per month. So he reads a lot. And one of my greatest regrets in life is that I'm not his number one author. I am number 2. He's told me I'm a close number 2, but I'm not number 1. So, excuse me. The next series I want to take up, is set in the modern day with some fantasy elements and time travel and gaming, because I want to impress my son. I have to be number 1 in his eyes.
Which I'm sure you will be. But, you've always, in fact, another comment of yours that you made, that the book is an active medium while a movie is passive, because there you all, explain that thought.
Look, the thing is that the way the audiovisual medium is, it tends to dominate, right? You can only see one imagination in there. That's the director's imagination, right? Whereas in a book, how an author works essentially is we kind of create the scene for you. We build the world for you. We build in the dialogues for you. But you fill that in with your own imagination after that. So 6 million people may have read my books, but trust me, everyone would have interpreted Lord Shiva differently, Lord Ram differently, because everyone brings in their own imagination.
Correct.
So it's a much more, in that sense, a much more active medium. As compared to if you're watching a movie, if you're watching Ramanand Sagarji's Ramayana, you can only see Lord Ram as Arun Govil. You can't see him as anything else, because that's what you're seeing. You can't build in your own imagination into it. So the fact that in a book you can build in, as a reader, your own imagination is what makes it unique. You will read the book differently from how someone else will read the book. Same book, but different reading.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I got. The Ram that I read in your book, I do not see him as going through what he made Sita do later, the Agni Pariksha, the test of
Wait for the 5th book. Wait for the 5th book.
Right.
And actually, if you read the Valmiki Ramayana, even there, it's one of the things, because Sundarkand does not make sense, because actually he's never behaved that way. So then what happens out there?
Why?
So wait for the 5th book for my interpretation of that.
Okay, on that very tantalizing note, I think we're going to call this interview for an end. But this is a book which I would recommend really highly, because I know that Amish has got enough laurels. In fact, there are about 2 pages of people recommending the book before you get to the book, but it's worth it. So thank you so much for this conversation, and hope to do much more with you later.
Thank you.
And all the best. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.